Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to both of you for your testimony, Ms. Paya. Thank you for your personal story. For over 60 years, the Cuban people have been oppressed by the worst impulses of a brutal regime and failed promises of communist propaganda. And what we're seeing today is those people saying enough is enough. We must stand with them and finally rid the Western Hemisphere of this hegemon of oppression. And unfortunately, the Biden administration is sending very dangerous and mixed signals through both policy and rhetoric to those that wish to flee this brutal regime. That if you're fleeing a communist regime where defectors are silenced or shot and everyday citizens are starving to death, you're not welcome in America. This is the message that Secretary Mayorkas, who himself was born in Havana, gave last week when he remarked that Cuban refugees attempting to flee by the sea will not be permitted in the United States. This message is echoed again by Acting Assistant Secretary at the State Department when he remarked that the protests were peaceful and rooted only in concerns about rising COVID cases and medicine shortages. This is false. The Cuban people, as you've mentioned, are shouting Libertad. They're waving the American flag. They're standing for freedom. They're not shouting down with an embargo. And while our administration downplays the severity of the crisis in Cuba and pledges to turn away Cuban refugees, President Biden has simultaneously thrown open the southern borders to cartels, coyotes, and others. Meanwhile, the administration advocating for socialist policies right here in the United States, when we see massive government control over society, simply does not work. Cuba is showing us in real time and the world how quickly communism collapses and leads to a spiral of deadly conditions of poverty, starvation, and hopelessness, causing enough desperation that right now Cubans are staring down the oppressors in the streets and risking their lives to cross treacherous waters on homemade rafts to reach the shores of liberty, the symbol of freedom, the United States of America. And the United States remains the beacon of freedom and democracy around the world, and we must do everything within our power to support those who are valiantly standing for liberty, and we must do it right here at home. There have been a chorus of this very body right here in Congress supporting the Cuban people in their efforts, and I certainly support that effort as well. And instead of throwing our doors open to human traffickers on our southern border, President Biden must take decisive action to bolster the pro-democracy movement and support the brave Cubans who are fighting in their own streets for liberty. Ms. Paya, how important is it to have freedom of speech? What does it mean to have freedom of speech?
Thank you so much. It is fundamental, and is the root of what is going on in Cuba. The people of Cuba haven't waited for the Cuban regime to authorize them to speak. They are shouting freedom in the streets. And if I make a call, a request for all of you, is to please, to listen to what the Cuban people is demanding at the street. At the highest possible risk, which is life, they are demanding freedom. They are demanding the end of the dictatorship. Please, do not politicize that. It's not about politics. It's not about right and left. It's about the main contradiction that the Cubans have experienced, which is not the embargo or any other contradiction between the military dictatorship and any other country. It's the main contradiction. The root of the suffering of the Cuban people is the conflict between a group of militaries that have held power in a legitimate way for more than 62 years and a whole population that is demanding a change, that is demanding a transition process, that is demanding democracy, and that now the United States and the rest of the world have the opportunity and the challenge to take sides with the Cuban people to help the Cuban people to hold accountable that regime and to bring about freedom in Cuba. That also means democratic stability and also means getting rid of one of the threats that the national security of this country has in this hemisphere.
Thank you for that. And I just want to go back to one of the remarks that you made, that you said that lifting sanctions is basically funding terrorism. It's funding the dictatorship to do what they want through military action. And I appreciate your comments on that. And Mr. Chairman, I know I'm out of time. Thank you again for holding this hearing. I yield back.